C.J. Stroud, DeAndre Swift, and Jerry Jeudy are among the biggest veteran winners following the 2025 NFL Draft. We discuss why and the other vets whose fantasy value is up on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with the NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, betting, and the NFL offseason for sportingnews.com.
Today, we're going to talk about the biggest veteran winners following the NFL draft. So we went through all of the landing spots for the running backs and wide receivers and those fantasy relevant players that we think can find some success or maybe not as a rookie. So if you missed those two episodes, go listen to them on Monday and Tuesday. But getting back to the veterans here now, there's quite a few guys whose value increased following the draft due to their team's decisions during the entire draft. So we're going to get through that today with the top quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers who are all the biggest winners. Before we get to that, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Let's start at the quarterback position because this one was kind of shocking to me. We've been down on C.J. Stroud, right? Terrible second season for him in terms of fantasy, but also in terms of actual NFL quarterbacking. It was worse than his rookie season. And there's been changes this year. They changed their offensive coordinator from Bobby Slowick to Nick Cali. And then they lost Stephon Diggs. And then Tank Dell is going to be out for probably the entire year. Then they trade away Larry Tunsil. So it was kind of all over the place. But then during the draft, they not only take Jaden Higgins early in the second round, but also come back and take Jalen Noel in the third round. Earlier in the offseason, they traded for Christian Kirk. So all of a sudden, his weapons are looking, stacked over there, and they have worked to try to fix up the offensive line a bit. So what are your thoughts on C.J. Stroud after this draft?
Yeah, it was a dramatic drop for him last year when you look at the average scoring. He was outside of the QB2s. He was down there near the bottom of the league with his production. Part of it, again, he didn't have the weapons. It was there for a while, but then those guys got hurt. Then he was just Nico Collins facing a lot of coverage and this team running a lot with Joe Mixon to try to save themselves, and it worked to some degree, that they were still the best team in their division and that they just kind of had to reinvent themselves. But they did need to make a schematic change here. The Tunsil trade was a bit surprising. They're not terrible at offensive tackle, all things considering. They have a couple veterans there in Cam Robinson and Trent Brown. So they at least have some options. They did get Durante Ursary in the draft as somebody that could potentially start for them. So they did address that as well. And then you look at the receiving core, yeah, it was just a brutal break for him last season. You didn't really also see much from Dalton Schultz and things to kind of offset that wide receiver issue. Now you have a lot of depth all of a sudden here with Nico Collins. There is a lot of inexperience there, so let's just be mindful of that. But you figure the Texans are going to rebound. The reason Slowick was gone is because he had such a production regression from the quarterback. So, again, the thing about C.J. Stroud, he's going to be a bit capped because he's not going to give you much in the running game. But in terms of a pocket passer with downfield weapons, he certainly has been upgraded in that capacity. So I don't know if he can go all the way back. That's quite a yo-yo, right, to go to 12 to 10 to 32 to back up to the top 12, but he's going to be a lot closer to the top 12 than he is near the bottom of the league. I can just say that. He's just too talented, and the Texans know this, and they've kind of gone all in to help him. So I think these weapons are going to have to make a greater impact sooner rather than later, and I think the Texans will see those results. I also think that there's going to be more pressure on him to win some games here just because of maybe some defensive issues that they have to kind of sort through. So I think Stroud is going to be a strong rebound candidate. I just don't think it could be all the way up into the top 10.
Yeah, it's not going to push them to top 10 for sure, but I do think it pushes them to around that quarterback 15 mark. Yeah. I mean, we kind of had him buried here in our original rankings and, the top 20. So I do think this pushes him up a bit, and he's right there now with the risk of the pocket quarterbacks, right? The pocket quarterbacks that aren't, we're not expecting to throw 35 to 40 touchdowns, right? So he's right in that range. Now, Bryce Young is a guy we've been higher on this offseason, and the Panthers decided, instead of trying to fix their defense with that first round pick, they just wanted to keep helping out their young quarterback and keep having him grow, because we saw the growth last year in the end of the season from weeks 12 through 18. He really started to come out of his shell, and he was averaging 20.7 fantasy points per game during that span. And that was thrown to Xavier Legette and Adam Thielen and David Moore and Jalen Coker. Not these, Adam Thielen's fine, but he's also 5 years old now. They got him a true wide receiver one into Teteroa McMillan right there in the 8th overall pick. Instantly the top target in this offense, you'd think. They spent that high of draft capital, and he's so talented, and he's such a big player too at 6'4", 219 pounds. He dominated at Arizona. He was that entire offense. It's hard not to see T. Higgins or even Mike Evans in him when you watch him play. So I think this is a great ad for the Panthers, and I think this is a great ad for Bryce Young's potential in fantasy.
Yeah, Dave Canales' influence has turned into really good fantasy quarterbacks. Geno Smith was definitely startable when he was the quarterbacks guy in Seattle. Then we saw the offensive coordinator stint in Tampa, and it's turned Baker Mayfield into a viable quarterback in fantasy, and has kept that up here in Canales. Just needed that go-to receiver. He had DK Metcalf to help Geno Smith, and then he had, of course, Evans. So now you get that big outside target to make some plays. That helps all these other guys because they're more complementary receivers. There's no go-to guy among the bunch, but between the outside number 2 and the slot, there are some options, including Thielen, who can be a big slot for this team and still kind of defy his age and produce when needed, right? I'm not saying he's going to be a number 1, but now he doesn't have to be a number 1 with McMillan in there. So Bryce Young, again, he also gives you a little bit more mobility in running. He's willing to score touchdowns with his legs, and they're kind of opening that up as well. We know that this offshoot of Mayfield, we saw Mayfield start to run a little bit in the leftover offense. So I think you can see Young padding his stats a little bit with what's going on the ground. But McMillan is a game changer. He also is a source of touchdowns, which is big. We were looking for where is going to be the person who scores. Well, McMillan could easily put up 10 touchdowns as a rookie. That's how big and strong he is. So there's all these things pointing up for Bryce Young. So, Michelle, let me ask you this. Are you more feeling C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young after what we've seen in the offseason so far?
I think I'm more feeling Bryce Young, because I just think the ceiling is higher with Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Like you brought up, the mobility is there. He started to run more. He started to score with his legs. We just know that's not there with Stroud. And I'm going to lean Bryce Young there. But also, we got to talk about one more winner at quarterback position after the draft, and it's Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to rank him this year because 41 passing touchdowns last year, by far an outlier in his career. He was quarterback 4 in fantasy points per game for fantasy last season. And we were saying, we expect him to regress a bit, but how far? Because after you get past the top 5 quarterbacks in fantasy, in our fantasy rankings, it's kind of a lot of risky players that all, a lot of them have high potential, but a low floor. And we've seen that high potential now of Baker. And then they go through the draft and they draft Emeka Egbuka, who is maybe my favorite wide receiver in this draft class, in the first round. They re-signed Chris Godwin. They still have Mike Evans. And also for Baker, you never know when the Buccaneers might be like, maybe we want to try to see what we can get at quarterback in the draft. They don't take a quarterback in the draft at all. So they're not even considering replacing Baker Mayfield in the slightest in the near future. I think Baker's just a huge winner here. And yeah, they changed OCs again. And 41 passing touchdowns is likely not going to hit again. But when you have such a stacked wide receiver room with Jalen McMillan as your wide receiver 4 now, I mean, he has to probably do pretty well again.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit of a future pick because Mike Evans is getting up there. He keeps producing, but he's hit his milestone number, and he's going to start to show some decline at some point. Chris Godwin's had a litany of injuries here, so you got to make up for that. Keep in mind Godwin was hurt. That's what gave McMillan the opportunity to go nuts down the stretch. Now they have a little bit more options in contingency should one of these guys go down. If Evans, he always has that hamstring issue, it seems like, and Godwin, just again, knee, ankle, all these things in his recent past, but they kept him here. So I think they're looking a little to the future. The Bucs can do that because they don't have any as glaring needs. The last real position they need to fill is safety with Antoine Winfield Jr. So now they're like, okay, let's add some depth in the first round. So I like it. Again, for Baker, it's great. It's not necessarily great for McMillan, and we'll get into that in the next show. But yeah, Baker's got plenty of weapons. Don't forget about K. Dotton, the running backs, the offensive line. All this lines up really well. So again, 40 is hard to duplicate in the ideal circumstances, but I think at least 30 you should get from Baker Mayfield with this situation.
And it's crazy he got 41 when you just brought up K. Dotton. He was the second highest target last year. Yeah. K. Dotton was. I mean, Chris Godwin only played 7 games, so he's getting back Chris Godwin, and he's getting Amika Ibuka. And like I said, he still has Mike Evans. He gets Jalen McMillan in the second year. I mean, throwing 41 passing touchdowns when really it was Mike Evans and a bunch of guys he was just kind of spreading the ball around to was very, very impressive. Now, I don't think there is a bigger winner after the NFL draft than Bears running back DeAndre Swift. Obviously, Caleb Williams was a winner, but he's been a winner all offseason long. DeAndre Swift, I don't think anyone's value increased higher than his. So we will jump in to running backs right after a quick break. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery, and now I budget smarter and save a lot more money. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNNFL for half off your first year. The biggest shock of the draft was the Bears just like not taking a running back. I mean, they finally did take a running back in the 7th round, but I mean, they went tight end in the 1st round, wide receiver in the 2nd round. Great for Caleb Williams, but this whole offseason has been great for Caleb Williams, right? They add Ben Johnson. They beef up their interior offensive line. The one person we were worried about losing value is DeAndre Swift because they're like, well, I'm sure Ben Johnson wants his running back. They don't take one. So now DeAndre Swift is the starting running back for a Ben Johnson offense that seems to be loaded with skill players that give him room to work. I mean, all of a sudden, DeAndre Swift looks like he could be a top 12 running back next year.
Yeah, this is all to DeAndre Swift now. Like, it just comes down to him. I mean, you upgraded the interior offensive line as a whole with Joe Thuney, Drew Dahlman, and Jonah Jackson. So the interior line for run blocking is fantastic. You can't doubt that. They're actually okay on the right side as well with Darnell Wright. He's a good run blocker in his own right. So you've got a great line, which DeAndre Swift had in Philadelphia. He had a big game in Philadelphia against the Vikings. Everything was right there for him to have a big year, and he didn't come through. And he was showing some power running, right? He handled the volume in that game, and he can just have some burst as well. But look, DeAndre Swift is loaded with talent. I think he just has to manifest it a little bit. His frame was a little bit smaller, and that's what's happened with the durability. That's why I was really questioning the Lion or the Bears not getting a back here, kind of following that Lions blueprint with former Bear David Montgomery, taking a little pressure off Jahmyr Gibbs. That was the blueprint set by Ben Johnson. But I don't know what all this talk. They were going to take Ashton Genty. They were going to take Amari and Hampton. Then they end up with Monagai or whoever late in the draft. And I'm like, this is weird, right? All the rumors said they're going to take a running back high. Then they go from 60 to 0 in wanting a running back here. So I don't know what to make of this, how much they want to buy into Swift. Do they believe a little bit more in the backups that Roschon Johnson can be okay in a power role because they upgraded their offensive line? Do they see that? You know, like the offensive line was a bigger issue for the running game, so they can plug and play anybody behind that. So I don't know what they're thinking, but right now we know that Swift is the lead back for sure, and he's going to stay on the field for receiving downs. He's had the power production before, whether it's in Detroit or Philadelphia. So everything is there. It's just how much do you trust DeAndre Swift to take advantage of everything that's been given to him here in this situation. So really that's the only question. But yeah, you have to say that his stock really rises because they drafted it back and you would have seen it plummet here in Chicago.
I do think that Swift could be the discount Breece Hall this year, right? Like Breece Hall
Yeah.
is still going to go high because of his name, but Swift is on the much better team. Well, that we think is going to be the much better team with the better play caller, and they're probably going to get similar work. And both have been disappointing with the work they have gotten throughout their career. But I think I kind of lean the Swift route over Hall, even if they were the same cost. But I think you'll be able to get Swift a lot cheaper. Now, another running back winner after the draft was Chase Brown of the Bengals. They needed so much help on defense, and that's exactly where they went to. Just defense. Didn't take a running back to the 6th round. They didn't even sign anyone besides Samaje Perine. I guess they brought him back in the offseason. They did adjust Zach Moss's contract so he could stay around, but we don't even know how healthy he's going to be. That his whole injury has been very hush-hush, I feel like. So Chase Brown, clear lead back next year, and he got it done when he was the clear lead back from weeks 9 through 18, 24 touches per game during that span. It was 23.6 to be exact, behind only Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, and Bijan Robinson. And he was a very good fantasy asset. So Chase Brown, I mean, we kind of figured the Bengals wouldn't go running back early, but now that it officially happened, we have to call him a winner.
Yeah, he's a winner, and he was very productive. And look, when they had Joe Mixon, what was it? It was pretty much a lot of Joe Mixon in a lot of situations, and then a little dash of Samaje Perine. So maybe history is repeating itself here with Perine back in the mix, and maybe that's what we'll see with Chase Brown. I mean, he's a smaller guy, but I think they would trust him to produce. I mean, I think he probably surprised them a bit in how well he could score, and he was just a change of pace back. So very good athlete. Was proved to be rather durable for his size and strength. So when you look at that, I think, yeah, he's in good shape here as a guy that we're going to target a lot, maybe even in the top 12. We'll see how that plays out. But the other situation, I'm not sure what to make of this one, okay? The Cowboys kind of address running back, but this is what they have replacing Rico Dowdle now. They have Jaden Blue, who we really like as a sleeper, so he has a big opportunity here. But they also have Javonte Williams, who the Broncos replaced with R.J. Harvey. And you also have Miles Sanders, who the Panthers took a running back in this class as well. So they were adding some depth behind Chuba Hubbard. So I don't know what to think here. The Cowboys, again, they kind of left it open last year when they didn't bring back Ezekiel Elliott or Tony Pollard. It kind of became by default Dowdle. I feel like something else might happen here in a similar vein where one of these guys emerges and they just roll with him as a lead back.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because Miles Sanders and Rico Dowdle just switched places, basically.
Yeah.
I don't get what the Cowboys are doing. We thought after last year they would learn their lesson and say they can't just completely avoid the running back position, but that's pretty much what they did again. I do like Jaden Blue, but I don't know if he's ready to take over a lead role. We never saw it in Texas. He's a smaller back. Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders have stunk. I mean, that's just it. They've stunk with the work they've gotten, especially Javonte Williams over the last couple of years. Like he had the opportunity to take over with the Broncos, and he couldn't do it with Sean Payton. I don't know if he's going to do it with Brian Schottenheimer. No, maybe he's better behind this Cowboys offensive line, which they cannot stop drafting Tylers and the offensive line in the first round. It's their favorite thing to do. If I had to take a bet here of who will be the starter in week 1 and who will get the chance immediately, it's Javonte Williams. But are we just staying away from this backfield altogether? Because it really could be any 3 of these guys that end up emerging.
Yeah, I wouldn't totally stay away. Pay attention. You could get a value here like we did with Dowdle last year. Like we didn't think much of him, but sometimes opportunity outweighs talent. And Dowdle did show a little bit of talent in his time in Dallas, where I think they're following the same philosophy as Detroit or Chicago and Detroit, really. Looking at the offensive line. If we upgrade the offensive line, our running backs will be okay, and we don't need to invest a lot in this position if that's not what we want to do. So I think you have that. So it looks like a committee at first, but again, they tend to lean on one back, so they don't telegraph play situationally. So we'll watch this battle very carefully. But Blue has every opportunity to win this, but you figure Michelle's right. They'll to Williams here. So we'll look at 3 receivers. We thought these teams were definitely going to take receivers, the Browns, Bills, and 49ers. Well, that was not the case, and they really made their veterans really happy there. So we'll talk about those 3 to close our show right after this quick break. All right, this episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are here. We're almost into the second round all around here. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Don't forget, there's a big game tonight as the Lakers try to stay alive against the Timberwolves. They're down 3-1. So when you get in the action there, join FanDuel, place your $5 bet. You'll get $250 in bonus bet if your bet wins. There's so many playoff games you can get to here. Look at that. So Celtics moving on. So all kinds of action with some bigger name teams that you can check it out. FanDuel makes it easy, whether you're picking your favorite team or diving into player props. From 3-pointers to steals and assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live props into a same-game parlay for a chance to win even bigger. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today while working the NBA playoffs. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show, and this kind of surprised me. The Browns had a pretty good draft overall, and after the draft, they did actually sign someone, but it's the well-traveled Deontay Johnson, who's, I guess, trying to be on every AFC North team before it's all said and done. But right now, this depth chart in Cleveland for their quarterback room, which is now Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders, reads Jerry Jeudy, then Cedric Tillman. We have to scroll our eyes all the way down to think Cedric Tillman is the number 2 option on this team. He had a flash, but he wasn't doing all that much. Judy's got to be heavily targeted, especially if Flacco ends up being the starting quarterback.
Well, that's what it is, right? When you look at these quarterbacks, I know they took Dylan Gabriel before Shedeur Sanders. If I had a bet on one of these rookie quarterbacks winning the starting job, if either of them are going to do it, it would be Shedeur Sanders, right? Like, he fell because of his father and because of his own issues with his personality and attitude. On the field, I think when you look across the board here between Flacco, Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders, I think Sanders could easily win the battle of starting. And I think that's a fine thing for Jerry Jeudy. Sanders is a pocket passer who's accurate, and I think he could be a good NFL quarterback. He just needs to fix his attitude. And then if Shedeur Sanders doesn't prove that he can be in the NFL, right, that he can be humbled and be a good team leader and be a good quarterback, then I do think it's Joe Flacco who starts, which we know is great for it's not great for the Browns, but it's good for fantasy wide receivers and Jerry Jeudy and getting those deep targets. And I also think at that point, if Joe Flacco is the quarterback, Cedric Tillman, who got injured after his breakout last year, we didn't get to see him finish out his year in his second season breakout. I do think he becomes a late round sleeper. So I think both of these guys got an increase. I guess technically they're trying to keep Elijah Moore around. They put in some bid for him, but who really cares? It's Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, but Jerry Jeudy definitely gets the biggest bump here with what they did at quarterback and then them not drafting any wide receivers.
Yeah, for sure. And I was also surprised that the Bills didn't take a wide receiver. Now, I don't know if they were desperate for a wide receiver because they did get Keon Coleman in the second round. I guess they're having more faith than maybe we do that Coleman is going to come through as outside receiver. Again, let's keep in mind they allowed the Chiefs to trade up and get Xavier Worthy. Well, they could have taken him instead of Keon Coleman. We might be very excited about Worthy at this point. We still are with the Chiefs, but now Coleman, ugh. I don't know. I think maybe they're just saying, look, we're a running team. We're diverse. We got multiple tight ends here. We don't need to force this. We're an inside passing team a lot to Khalil Shakir. So that's what my take is. I'm not going to suddenly be excited about Keon Coleman because of the Bills draft.
Yeah, we did expect them to go, add somebody for Josh Allen. Now, I don't think the reason why they lost the playoffs last year had to do with their offense at all or Josh Allen struggling because they didn't have the weapons. Like, I do think that was very much just a defensive base and they just kind of fell apart there. They always do against the Chiefs defensively. But I am like, it's just Keon Coleman, Josh Palmer, and then Khalil Shakir, who will likely lead again at targets. But the reason Shakir is not listed here is I don't think this increases his value at all. He's just exactly what he already was. He already was the lead receiver here with 100 targets, and it's just not good enough for fantasy. Just doesn't have those big splash plays enough. Keon Coleman does offer the skill set to be that big playmaker. Obviously needs to be a lot more consistent and productive. At the end of the year, they did try to feed him the ball more, had 7 or more targets in 4 of the last 7 games. But the production just wasn't really there. He had one big game of 125 yards against the Titans. And then in week 18, he did have 10 targets, which was a career high, only 2 receptions, 31 yards. Josh Allen wasn't playing in that game, to be fair. But there is just a lot of inconsistencies from him as a rookie. We'll see if he can step up. But definitely, he's on our radar more now that the Bills didn't take a wide receiver early, I guess. They did take one in the 7th round.
Yeah, it's a lot like the DeAndre Swift situation. The only person stopping Keon Coleman's opportunity is Keon Coleman.
Yeah.
Like, he has to get on the page, work with Josh Allen, become that key outside target for him. He has to learn a lot from his rookie year because it was definitely underwhelming all around when you see how worthy ended his rookie year, right? He was in overdrive in the Super Bowl where we didn't have any of those moments for Keon Coleman. So I like the talent. I like the situation. Just has to all come together. And maybe we're asking too much, at least in this year. Maybe it's what we see in year 3 with Keon Coleman. Last but not least are the 49ers with Ricky Pearsall. Now, we looked at the potential. Are they going to trade Brandon Ayuk, whatever? Deebo Samuel's gone. George Kittle, in the meantime, got an extension. He got paid his money to settle him before Brock Purdy. But Ricky Pearsall is, again, in a great situation here to be the replacement for what they had in Deebo.
Yeah, I mean, a couple weeks ago when you were out, we did a dynasty show, and I had Pearsall as a buy candidate before the draft because the 49ers just had way too many defensive needs for them to go wide receiver early, and they didn't end up taking a wide receiver until Jordan Watkins in the 4th round. But again, even like Kyle Shanahan just does not trust rookies anyways, wide receivers especially. So Jordan Watkins, I don't expect to see the field or do much at all. And then in the offseason, all they did was trade away Deebo Samuel and signed DeMarcus Robinson. Like, Ricky Pearsall was their 1st round pick last year when they didn't when that was a shocking pick, right? Last year, wide receiver wasn't a need for them going into the draft. So they spent the draft capital on him. Unfortunately, his rookie season was kind of pushed back with his development, with getting shot in the chest, and didn't play until week 7. Yeah. And again, like, it just takes Shanahan a bit to trust these younger guys. So I think Pearsall gets a huge role next year immediately, with Brandon Ayuk coming back from a terrible knee injury and probably won't be back till the middle of the season. I think he's a huge winner after this draft, and he should be much higher in rankings come 2025 fantasy drafts.
Yeah, I mean, we always look immediately like, what is the guy going to do, right? When they took Pearsall, we didn't know, but I think they probably had well in mind that they were not long for Samuel, then the Ayuk injury happened. So everything's kind of rolled into Ricky Pearsall's favor. Even having George Kittle make sure that he's around, it's a guy to attract attention downfield. So they got to take care of Brock Purdy, but it looks like he'll be well sorted with all of his weapons, with Pearsall jumping up and roll massively this season.
Yes. Now, they have to re-sign Brock Purdy. But if that all happens, then this will all hold true, in my opinion. So that is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back tomorrow talking about the biggest veteran losers after the NFL draft. So don't miss that. Talk to you then. Bye, y'all.